There are many reasons why Louisville has been able to turn the corner, but one of those is James Scott's progression through the season.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Louisville is on a 5-game winning streak, so we decided to take a little bit of a deeper dive into what has prompted the turnaround of the season. And one of the things that we have found is that James Scott's progression has been key for Pat Kelsey's team. We'll break that down a little bit more in the first segment. We have a 2-part weekly mailbag. The first segment will feature expectation talk, whether or not Louisville can still win 20 games, what the expectations are now during this winning streak. In the final segment, we will talk a little basketball recruiting, some key questions surrounding Nate Ament, Tyron Stokes, and many more. So a lot of basketball talk. If you're listening to this, you can't tell, but if you're watching this, you can see that there is a new background. Hopefully the flag that I got at a recent Louisville basketball game is a little bit more appealing than the outdated 2023 Louisville football posters that have been up over the past, almost a year or so. But nonetheless, appreciate you all tuning in all through the early parts of 2025. And 2025 has been good for Louisville men's basketball. The Cardinals are currently in the midst of a 5-game winning streak. They're looking better and better. And with some time between the games, the Tuesday, Saturday games, and not really much football portal talk, I wanted to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into, what is sparking this run for Louisville? What has helped the Cardinals turn the corner? And there's no one answer. There's multiple answers, truthfully. A good amount of answers. But one of those in particular that gets brought up, but we don't really go into a little bit more analysis on it, is the progression of James Scott. And coming into the season, transferring from the College of Charleston, James Scott, 6'11", 220 pounds. I was questioning not necessarily the skill set, because it's clear that the potential is there. I was questioning, okay, a player that's a little bit raw on the offensive side of the basketball, how is he going to react to playing larger and better players than he did a season ago? And I remember mentioning before the season that I felt like it was just going to take some time for James Scott to get acclimated with the speed of play in ACC play, and the physicality too. And it seems like he's done that. And I'm not really, that prediction from me wasn't necessarily anything groundbreaking. Of course, it's going to take a center that isn't the largest, isn't the strongest, has a ton of athleticism, but doesn't have an extremely polished offensive skill set. It's going to take some time for players to get acclimated. And not to mention, it's going to take time for any player to get acclimated with a brand new team. Now, one thing that James Scott and Rain Smith had going for them was that they already understood the system that Pat Kelsey and company wanted to run here at Louisville. And if you hear Pat Kelsey talk, he raves about James Scott a good amount. He talks about his work ethic, that he's a sponge when it comes to learning new things. And I was talking with a member of the coaching staff today on Thursday, and I asked the coach, what can you tell me about James Scott getting more and more comfortable with each and every game? And I'm going to read you verbatim what this coach said. Coach gave me the green light to share this. Nothing groundbreaking here, but I think it's a testament to the work that he's putting in. The coach says, James watches more film and prepares better than anyone I have ever coached. He will literally will all in upper caps. He will literally will himself to be comfortable. His comfort comes from the work he puts in and the confidence PK and his teammates have in him. He's so selfless. We all knew it would take some time for his comfort. And he repeats in all caps, so selfless. And what this coach says reiterates what Pat Kelsey also talks about almost on a daily basis, it feels like, is that everyone raves about the work ethic of James Scott. And when he gets in the game, he hustles. But to start the year, whether it was, not necessarily knowing the role on the team with a brand new set of players, getting acclimated to the level of talent that you're playing, a mixture of both, it took a while for him to get his footing. And we talked about in that Eastern Kentucky game that we just need to get more production out of James Scott, because in that Eastern Kentucky game, he had, 5 points and 9 rebounds. Actually, I think scratch that. It wasn't the Eastern Kentucky game. It was the Kentucky game. He had 4 points, no rebounds, and he played 12 minutes because he spent a good amount of the game in foul trouble. He ended up fouling out of that game. And he was able to sort of continue to take the steps forward. He had 5 points and 9 rebounds against Eastern Kentucky. But over these past 3 games, North Carolina, Virginia, Clemson, against North Carolina, 11 points, 8 boards, 2 blocks, and a steal, 1 personal foul. Against Virginia, only 6 points, but 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block, 1 steal, and 1 personal foul. And then against Clemson, arguably, in my opinion, was his best performance of the season. 11 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, 1 assist, 1 steal, and no personal fouls. And in the past 3 games, only 1 combined turnover. So if you're looking to the box scores and the statistical numbers to be able to point to the progression, well, you're going to be left a little bit disappointed. But that doesn't mean that the progression isn't tangible from what you can see on the court. And to understand how he's getting better and better, you just have to watch every game and focus on Scott and what he's doing better now than he did a couple months ago or even a month ago. Offensively, the scoring, I think it's going to take an offseason of just committing to developing something of substance in terms of a post game. He's obviously really efficient with what he does on his role. I mean, he's shooting 84% from the field because most of his offense comes from above the rim on those lob opportunities or dunk opportunities. Not much offense outside of that. And I honestly thought that was what we were going to expect this season. This offseason coming up is where I think that you start to see that semblance of a post game or even be able to just have that, post hook. But he's becoming more comfortable getting the ball at the top of the key, being able to do the delayed dribble handoff or being able to turn around with his back to the basket and find an open man, being the screener and being able to draw the opposing defense because he's shown that he is a legitimate lob threat. And he understands, standing at the dunker spot or he's rolling off the screen. He understands his role in the offense. He's not trying to do too much, and he's not trying to do too little. He's doing exactly what he needs to do, and he's executing his role to a T. What is that role? Well, it is to catch the ball above the rim and put it in and to attack the offensive glass. Now, the rebounding numbers, I would say, they've been somewhat consistent. Early on in the year, they weren't really there, but ever since the Ole Miss game back in early December, he's been able to, I think he's had at least 8 rebounds all but 2 games, and that was the Kentucky and Florida State games, but at least 8 rebounds in all but 2 games. And even the block numbers, the block numbers aren't jumping off the page either. Granted, he has had 2 blocks in 2 of the past 3 games, but you look to the defensive side, and early on in the season, James Scott was getting bullied off the block, was fouling a ton, and it was pretty clear that with all the injuries that you have to Kason Pryor, to Koren Johnson, Abubakar Traore being on the sideline for a couple months, James Scott had to have more composure on the court when it comes to not fouling. And he's done a great job of just going straight up, defending really well, but staying competitive, not just giving up open buckets. He's done a really good job, and it's not showing in the box scores. But when a guy catches the ball down in the paint, he's not just getting bullied anymore. I mean, the effort is there, but you can just tell that something is clicking for him. Another aspect of his game defensively that I am becoming more and more impressed with as the games go on, and that is, the defense on the screen, being able to hedge over the ball screen and defend the ball handler that's being able to try to create a decision, or being the roll defender as well, and being able to defend that roll man, whether it's a pick and pop situation, whether he's cutting to the basket. Regardless, Scott is using that athleticism and that length to disrupt defenses. He's not going to be the best interior defender that he can be until he adds a little bit more strength, and I don't think anyone would disagree with you on that. But he's starting to compensate for that lack of weight he may have versus others by utilizing that height, that wingspan, that athleticism. We know he can jump out of the gym, but you can just tell he's getting more and more comfortable. And we'll have conversations about Chucky Hepburn and Javon Hadley having 32 points, and Terrence Edwards turning it up defensively and being more of a scoring threat, and Abubakar Traore doing it all. But I felt like we needed a segment to highlight what James Scott is doing, because it might not look like much on the box score, and I get that. But the impact is much, much greater when you watch the games and you understand how he's helping the Cardinals in that regard. So I'm really, really excited to see what James Scott is able to do for the remainder of the season. More basketball talk when we come back on this Thursday edition of the show. Some questions about, can Louisville still win 20 games? Do expectations still change? We'll answer those questions when we come back on this episode of Locked On Louisville. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future, not feature. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One of the ways that the discussion about this Louisville basketball team has changed since the Cardinals have created this 5-game winning streak is, well, what is the end goal here? Does the ceiling raise? Do we change the expectations? Much, much more. And I like these questions that were delivered to me actually from a Discord that I'm in. The first one says, can Louisville still win 20 games? And that's a really good question. I will point out to you that before the season, my official prediction for Pat Kelsey's team, before we had all the news about the injuries, was 21-10. Even when Corin Johnson, Kason Pryor, and Abubakar Traore all went down with injuries, I held firm to that to that prediction, and I said that I was going to wait until early January to reassess. Well, I think it's probably an appropriate time to reassess at this point. So the Cardinals, sitting at 11-5 with 5 games left in the month of January. Let's see. I'm actually going to count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15 games. Louisville could technically go 26-5, but Louisville has to win 9 of the last 15 to win 20 games. Can Louisville still win 20? I do believe so. I definitely believe so, especially since you've defeated North Carolina, you've won at Virginia, and you also beat Clemson. And if you split the series with Pittsburgh, the road game on Saturday and then the home game in March, you're feeling really good. So let's look at the remainder of this. 5 games left in the month of January: at Pittsburgh, at Syracuse, first Virginia, at SMU, and versus Wake Forest. Not an easy schedule. I think Syracuse is the worst of those 5 teams, but playing in the Carrier Dome is not easy. So I wanted to win. Let's play the hypothetical game. Let's play like this is more towards the floor than it is the ceiling. Let's say, coming into the month, I said that Louisville couldn't lose more than 2 games. Let's just say hypothetically they lose 2 games, and they are 14-7 going into the final 2 months. You look at February: at Georgia Tech, at Boston College, Miami at home, at NC State, at Notre Dame, versus Florida State, and at Virginia Tech. That's 7 games. And if you treat it the same way and you say, yeah, you have more road games, but it's maybe the teams aren't as good. Let's say you can't lose more than 2 games. So at that point, you are 19-9. And then you go to March. 3 home games: Pittsburgh, California, and Stanford. Let's say you had to win 2 of those 3. You're sitting there at 20-11. Well, actually, you would just have to win 1 game. So that would get you to 20. And of course, this is sort of towards the floor than the ceiling. You'd be at 20-11. I think it's very possible that Louisville can still win 20 games. I am going to hold to my prediction that Louisville will go 21-10. And I'm hoping that's the case. I still think that they're going to be a top 4 team in the ACC. And again, I hope that is the case. The next question is, amidst this 5-game winning streak, do your expectations change for this team? If you had Kaysen Pryor and Corin Johnson, I think that the answer might be different. But with the injuries that you still deal with, my expectation was to make the NCAA tournament. Remember, I said that winning a game was the expectation, and when those 2 were announced that it was out for the year, they were out for the year, I said let's scale it back from winning a game to just making the tournament. Again, my expectation for this team in the 2024-25 season is to make the NCAA tournament. And I know that it feels like that expectation was a little high, depending on who you asked, because I remember talking to some people thinking, after the injury, that if we can get to 500, I'll be happy. Or if we can get to the bubble, I'll be happy. And I disagreed, but I 100% understood where people were coming from, because withstanding all of those injuries with a brand new team that hasn't been having a ton of success, and also making the NCAA tournament with not that many opportunities to get big time wins in conference play, I understood it looked like it was an uphill battle. I get it. It technically still is an uphill battle. Just because you're 11-5, it's great, but it's not the end all be all. Like, you still have a long ways to go. That's why you have to stay focused in the moment. Like, the only thing that matters right now is that game at Pittsburgh. And it sounds cliche, but it's a long season. And you learn in the ACC, and I know it's not as good of a league as the SEC or the Big 12, but a road game in conference play, it's a challenging task, especially if you become a good team and Louisville has the makings of continuing to be better and better, or to get better and better. Yeah, teams are going to want to beat you because, I mean, if tournament hopes are sort of out the window for some teams, but they can spoil your season, by all means, you know that they're going to try to do so. I mean, you're playing for pride at this point. So I don't think the expectations change. If Louisville beats Pittsburgh, do you think the Cardinals could land in the top 25? That's a really good question. You look at the rest of the top 25 now, there is not one team currently with 5 losses in the AP top 25. There are a couple teams with 4. Purdue's 11-4. Gonzaga is 12-4. But that's it in that regard. I'm looking at the other receiving votes. Louisville isn't even in the conversation as it relates to other receiving votes. Pittsburgh had 91, Clemson 19 coming into the week. I think, would it surprise me if they are? Like, well, put it this way. Should they be? I think so. Will they? Probably not. I think that it would probably take another week of going undefeated to land in the top 25. You beat Virginia again. You went on the road at Syracuse. I think if you beat Pittsburgh, you beat Syracuse, and you beat Virginia in your next 3 games, I think that you are without a doubt in the top 25. But right now, I think you probably should be if you beat Pittsburgh, but you're not going to be because people are just going to look at that record. So the mailbag doesn't end just yet. Next segment will be all about basketball recruiting. We'll answer some of your main questions when we come back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, want to take the time again to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. I just want to give you another update, or I'm sorry, remind you of an update. I'll be out of town a good amount next week for my day job. I will be out actually the majority of the week, so I'm going to pre-record some episodes over the weekend to be published on Monday and Tuesday. There won't be an episode Wednesday, probably won't be one Thursday, but there will be one when we return on Friday. So if you're sitting there, at the middle part of next week thinking, where are the episodes at? Just remember, there won't be. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we're going to try to make up for it as much as we can. So just a heads up on the scheduling for the program. But final segment of the show, final segment of this 2-part mailbag. Talked a lot about basketball last segment. We're going to focus on basketball recruiting this segment because there's been a lot of people that have talked about basketball recruiting. First question up is, how do you feel about Nate Ament's recruitment? Nate Ament, for those who don't know who he is a very, very good prospect, blue chip prospect, currently ranked as the on the 24/7 Sports Composite. He is number 4. He is the top remaining unsigned prospect, 6'9" power forward from Virginia, a player that, even though Louisville might be somewhat on the outside looking in, they still have a legitimate chance, and they are involved in this recruitment. I think Notre Dame is right there, Tennessee, Duke. Look, I think that Louisville has a chance. If you're asking me to put a percentage on it, which I feel like is probably what you are asking me here, I'd say about 25% currently until I hear elsewhere, until I hear otherwise. I think that Louisville has a chance, but I just don't know how legitimate of a chance, if that makes sense. And nothing that I've heard of suggests that the Cardinals are leading the recruitment. And until I hear that, I won't be able to begin to tell you how good of a chance Louisville has. 2-part question. Will Tyron Stokes reclassify to 2025? And what do you think the main factor will be in this recruitment? Tyron Stokes, the number 1 player in the 2026 class from the city of Louisville, but hasn't played in the city of Louisville in quite some time in terms of high school ball, played at various prep academies. Do I think he reclassifies? Based upon his comments in an article most recently, it sounds like he's not going to. These things can obviously change, and when they do, it happens pretty quickly. My intuition is telling me that he's going to stay in the 2026 class. And what's going to be the main factor here for Louisville? Well, here's the thing about it is any player that's a 5-star prospect, good amount of there's a good chance that they believe that they're going to make the pros wherever they go. Um, I think it's going to come down to, what makes sense from a basketball standpoint, but also NIL will play a huge role in this. Number one player, I mean, you saw what the rumored package was for AJ Devanza, $7 million. And rumor has it that Stokes wants to be around that number as well. And I'm not sure the validity of that, but that is the rumor going around. If that's the case, then NIL is going to be a major factor because you can't be too far off here. I mean, you basically had to do what BYU had to do to get AJ Devanza. Now Louisville has the hometown appeal to Tyron Stokes, but would he consider taking or leaving more money on the table to play with his hometown team? I don't know, but Louisville's going to have to be extremely competitive, and they're probably going to have to do something they haven't done before and really get up there in terms of the bidding war. So the main thing for me is I think that Louisville just has to, number one, continue winning, make sure it makes sense for him. I also think the success of Michael Brown Jr. could play a factor in this, a 5-star being able to come in and have success, and then NIL will make sense as well. Outside of Tyron Stokes, who would be your top 3 prospects on your priority list for the 2026 class? It's a really good question. I'm going to start out with another, not local guy, but a player from the state of Kentucky, Talon Kinney, ranked as a 5-star, 19th best player in the country. He plays for Overtime Elite in Atlanta. 6'1" guard that played for Newport High School up around the Cincinnati area, has played it a couple times at the King of the Bluegrass. I actually announced a couple of his games. I think it was last year at the King of the Bluegrass. I mean, he's different. He just controls the game with the ball in his hands, unlimited range, just a deep offensive skill set. I mean, so versatile as a ball handler and kind of gives me like those Michael Brown Jr. vibes. So Talon Kinney would probably be in my top 3. It's still kind of early. I think the second one out of the 3 would be Jordan Smith, 5-star shooting guard from Paul VI Catholic High School in Fairfax, Virginia, where, if you remember, VJ King came from. Jordan Smith ranked as the 7th best player, 6'2" shooting guard. Again, just really crafty with the ball in his hands. And I'm one of those people that believes that to have a ton of success in March, you have to have a really good guard play. And I would love for Louisville to go out and get guards that can just create for themselves, create for others, and give Louisville a chance to have some lottery picks in the NBA draft. Final prospect, I would probably kind of go back and forth here. I'm a big fan of Deron Rippey Jr.'s game, 6'2", 5-star point guard from Blair Academy, has visited Louisville. Unfortunately, he was on campus for that Tennessee game, but his dad apparently is friends with Russ Smith, so there's the connection there. But again, another player that can create for himself, create for others, get downhill, shoot the ball really well. And like I said, I'm just a really big fan of elite guard play. And those would probably be my top 3 priority prospects. But again, I think Louisville's going to have a really good chance in the 2026 class. So that is going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow when we preview the upcoming matchup on the road against Pittsburgh. We'll see you then. Go Cards.